All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome into our live stream for tonight. We are going to be talking about all of the interesting weather that we have coming up here, starting, of course, with that atmospheric river, and then obviously looking at the major river flooding that we have coming up as well. This looks like it has the potential to be a pretty high-impact event for parts of the area. So let some more folks come on in here to the stream. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Let's get things going here. All right. So, as always, good evening and welcome, everybody. I'm Matthew Fab with Western Washington Weather, and we are going to take a look at all of the active weather we have coming up here over the next couple of days, really through this week. All of that is influenced by this major atmospheric river that's starting to move into the area, and then we will see how that is going to impact flooding and rainfall and mudslides and all this kind of stuff. Welcome to the chat, Brian. Thank you for joining us. Please be sure to like and share and subscribe here. Get as many people on the stream as we can. It'll be awesome to do that so we can get as many people in the know as possible. So we're going to just start here, I guess, with what our overall pattern is, and we can look at the precipitable water. This is, again, amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. It's a pretty important thing to look at when you're looking at how atmospheric rivers work. And this is a good time, I think, for me to mention, as we kind of start things off here, that the term atmospheric river, it's a meteorological term. And I've had some people talk to me recently and say, hey, I don't really like the term atmospheric river. It sounds like we're trying to hype things. We're trying to be trendy. And yes, it has kind of become that in a way, but it is, at the bottom line, atmospheric river is a meteorological term that describes a meteorological phenomenon that has kind of entered the public realm of weather terms and stuff like that, kind of like bomb cyclone or heat dome, that kind of thing. And when it comes down to it, atmospheric river is a long, narrow, continuous current of moisture that brings a large amount of rainfall to a specific area over a short amount of time and often causes flooding. And that's exactly what we have happening right now. In the Northwest, we've often called them Pineapple Express in the past, but a Pineapple Express means it comes from Hawaii. As you can see here with this atmospheric river, it's coming from well north of Hawaii, so it can't truly be called a Pineapple Express, but it can be called an atmospheric river. And some people say, it's just a rainstorm, and it is a rainstorm, but it's just a really big rainstorm. And oftentimes too, using a term like atmospheric river can actually help get the word out and get people more engaged with it when they're realizing, this could be a pretty big deal. So that is one of the other reasons why I do like to say it's an atmospheric river, because obviously it is a big deal and we have a lot coming up here. So starting again with the precipitable water anomaly, this is an amount of water vapor in the atmosphere, and this just kind of shows you where all that moisture is aimed at. As we go through Monday morning, you can see that atmospheric river slamming into Western Washington, continuing all the way through Monday night before it starts to push south a little bit there into Western Oregon and parts of Southwest Washington on Tuesday morning. But you can see it doesn't stay down there for long, and by the end of the day Tuesday, it's already pushing back into Western Washington with some pretty juiced values there of precipitable water moving through the area. That continues all the way through Wednesday and then into Thursday, and then you can see we're getting to about there's Thursday, and then you can see as we go even into Thursday night into Friday, it is still just there's got a lot going on. There is a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, and by the time we get to Saturday, you can see you get a little bit more of that moisture starting to move back toward the area. Another way we can look at this here is what is called integrated vapor transport, and that is another way of looking at atmospheric rivers, because integrated vapor transport is basically talking about how much water vapor is in the atmosphere that is being moved, basically that being transported. That's what you're talking about there, and that is the strength of that is a good way to measure the strength of an atmospheric river. So you can see here, this is integrated vapor transport and sea level pressure, and this just kind of shows you where some of those stronger winds and stuff may be as well with the pressure lines. But the colors are the vapor transport, and you can see how as we go through into Monday, how that huge slug of moisture just slams into Western Washington as we go into Monday morning and into Monday afternoon. There you can see continuing to be right at that angle where it can just get right up into the lowlands and really cause some heavy rain. And then it pushes south over Oregon a little bit as we go into Tuesday. But you can see by the time we get to Tuesday afternoon into evening, you get another big area of moisture just slamming right back into western Washington. Really high IVT values there, indicating that this is a really, I guess for a lack of a better word, very juiced atmospheric river. There's a lot of juice, a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, and that is slamming right into western Washington all the way through Thursday. You can see that just continues, and it doesn't really push out of the area until you get to Thursday night there, Thursday evening into Friday morning. It starts to push out of the area, and then there's a lot more moisture out there, but it's not really impacting western Washington by the time we get to Saturday. So now that we've kind of seen that, integrated vapor transport, we've kind of seen where that moisture is going and how that works, we can, of course, look at the precipitation totals. So this is the latest run of the European model. I will stop this at midnight, and you can see we got a little bit more rain coming through parts of the area. If we go back to look at our radar right now, you can see we do have some more showers potentially moving up toward the lowlands. These shouldn't last for too long, but it does look like we have some more showers moving in. If we go back to our rain here on the European model, as we go into Monday, you can see how these totals are just going to skyrocket. By midday Monday, we already have an inch on the Kitsap Peninsula, 3/4 of an inch in the Seattle metro area. As we go to, we'll stop this here midnight Tuesday there, you can see we have 2 inches of rain for Tacoma, 1.5 inches for Seattle, an inch in Everett. The rain-shadowed areas in the northeast of the Olympic Peninsula still get an inch of rain as we go through Monday. You can see areas south of Tacoma getting 2.5 inches of rain there, down toward Olympia, Shelton, and then further down toward Portland. Portland gets about 1.5 inches. And then as we go into Tuesday, that rain totals increase there down across the Willamette Valley and a little bit across western Washington, but not as much until we get into Tuesday night there. And then those totals start to increase again. You can see it piling up in the Cascades as we go through Wednesday. And then as we go into Thursday, those totals continue to rise across parts of the Puget Sound area. And then as we go, we'll stop this here Friday night. So Friday night there, this is kind of when that rain has ended across parts of the Pacific Northwest. That the atmospheric river has pushed way up into British Columbia now. And what you have here by Friday night is from Seattle, or from about Everett northward there, you have about 2 to 2.5 inches of rain total across the region on the European model here. From Everett southward, you have 3 to 3.5 inches down towards Seattle. Tacoma getting about 3.5 to 4 inches, 4.5 to 5 inches there between Olympia and Portland. And then take a look at the Cascades. I mean, these are just huge amounts of rain. Looking at 8 to 13 inches or so of rain, maybe even up toward 14 inches of rain in the Cascades, and that's just through Friday. That's Monday to Friday, getting 14 inches of rain in some parts of the Cascades. This 12.4, that's at Snoqualmie Pass. So you're getting 12.4 inches of rain at Snoqualmie Pass through this week, and that obviously is going to cause a lot of flooding. Now, if we compare this to the national blend of models, this is run by the National Weather Service. It's a much higher resolution forecast. When we play this all the way out through Friday night, you can see again, it's showing a pretty similar thing. It shows a little bit more of a rain shadow there for areas around Everett, dip back towards Sequim, maybe about 1.5 inches total with this atmospheric river, while outside of that you have 4 inches in Tacoma, 5.5 in Olympia, and 4.5 up to 5 inches in Portland there. But again, the thing that remains constant in this forecast too is these just incredible amounts of rain in the Cascades. I mean, you're looking at 12 to 15 inches of rain for the Cascades as we go through this week. 8 inches for most of the areas in the foothills, or about 2 to 3,000 feet higher. And then once you get to those really high elevations, like 4,000 plus feet, you're looking at nearly a foot of rain, which is just staggering. All right, so we can also look here just real quick. I will duplicate our tab here, and we can look at, let's zoom in on Seattle and take a look at how much rain we're going to get tomorrow, which is going to be a pretty wet day. We have a couple of high-resolution models we can look at, the high-resolution rapid refresh model and the NAM model. So if we play this through, this is the high-resolution rapid refresh model, go all the way through midnight, so 12 a.m. there, technically Tuesday. And this shows that it'll be a pretty wet day for a few locations here. You can see not very much with the rain shadow of Vancouver Island and the rain shadow of the Olympics, keeping areas like Everett getting barely any rain, about 1/4 inch, and same thing up by Bellingham getting about 4/10 of an inch. But then you can see how some of that rain makes it through the Strait, Whidbey Island getting about 3/4 of an inch, which is more than usual considering Whidbey is used to being rain shadowed. You can see there from Seattle southward, that's where the line of about an inch of rain tomorrow is. Areas like Tacoma getting 1.5 to 2 inches of rain tomorrow, 2.5 inches up toward that in Olympia and out in Hoquiam, and then up to 3 inches tomorrow over in Shelton. And then you can see in the Cascade foothills here, like 2 to 2.5 inches there, South Hill and Graham, and then up toward 3 inches in North Bend, 5 inches at Snoqualmie Pass tomorrow. And this is going to allow for an initial rise on some of the area rivers. Now we can compare this to the NAM model, which is another one of our high-resolution forecasts. It shows a little bit less rain here in the lowlands, but that is probably not going to happen because it's also overdoing some stuff here. So I would say that this forecast we were just looking at from the high-resolution rapid refresh model there is probably the most accurate one. And then as we go into Tuesday, it kind of keeps those totals the same because that rain moves south toward Oregon. So what does that mean in terms of the river flooding? Well, things are going to be pretty crazy, and I think it is safe to say that is how things are going to go here. We have a lot of rivers that could flood, and we'll go through them. Even if we want to, we can go through them one by one. But getting the general overview of things, we'll start in the north. You can see you get action stage, which means bank full on the Nooksack River, and then you have major flood stage on the Skagit River in Mount Vernon and up in Concrete, and it looks like we're going to be reaching that. Let's move this down a little bit. There we go. We'll be reaching that Tuesday night into very early Wednesday morning, and then it starts to decrease, and then we get a secondary rise. And as we go further south, you'll see that the secondary rise gets a little bit bigger. So here is the Skagit River in Concrete, and you can see, again, that's going to be getting really high there, and that may even be getting high Tuesday night, or late Monday night into Tuesday. That will probably get pushed back a little bit. But again, that's pretty significant. That's a pretty big rise, and it drops down as we go to Wednesday and then rises back up again. So we may adjust the timing a little bit on this. We'll have to kind of wait and see how that plays out. Here's the Stillaguamish River in Arlington, not going to be getting much above minor flood stage, but it looks like it may crest as we go into Tuesday morning. And then maybe a little bit of a rise there, that secondary rise, but not too big. Excuse me. Meanwhile, we are going to see that secondary rise a little bit more here as we get further south. So this is the Skykomish River near Gold Bar, and the Skykomish River looks like it's already rising today there with a little bit of the rain that we had move in. It goes above to major flood stage by the time we get to tomorrow night, stays there overnight into Tuesday morning, and then drops down back toward action stage as we go into Tuesday night. But then by the time we get into Wednesday again, the Skykomish River back up into moderate flood stage, almost to major flood stage before a long trend down as we go into the weekend. Now, taking a look at the Snoqualmie River, this is going to be the one to watch because this can definitely have a big impact on a lot of people, especially down there through the Snoqualmie Valley where this will really be just full of water. So you can see we have two crests on the Snoqualmie River, and they're pretty big. So as we go into Tuesday midday there, you can see getting into major flood stage, its highest level in a few years back to 2022, and it peaks there Tuesday afternoon, and then goes back down into about action stage, so right on the border of minor flood stage by Wednesday morning, then starts rising again through the day Wednesday and remains at major flood stage from 4 p.m. Wednesday approximately all the way through Thursday into very late Thursday night into early Friday morning, and then slowly drops down as we go into as we go down toward Saturday there. So this could be pretty interesting for parts of the Snoqualmie River. This is highest flood in 3 years, and I've been in the Snoqualmie Valley when you get to major flood stage, and it is definitely a sight to see. There's a huge amount of water in there. The Snoqualmie River at Snoqualmie Falls, obviously this will probably be the most photogenic river in Washington, and you see, again, you get those two crests there, huge crest at Snoqualmie Falls, at 4 a.m. Tuesday, so unfortunately in the dark people won't really be able to see it, but that is just a huge amount of water going over Snoqualmie Falls right there as it gets into major flood stage for the first time in quite a while, drops way off as we go into Tuesday, rises again through the day Wednesday, peaks again at night Wednesday night there, but by Thursday morning it still is pretty high, but it's not in major flood stage. Again, we'll see how the timing on this plays out. It may change quite a bit here, so we have to watch the timing if it gets pushed back a little bit. Sometimes it takes a flood longer to get down a river than it seems like it would, so that's something to watch. A couple other rivers to take note of. This is a smaller one for some of my folks down there in in Pierce County, you guys know what I'm talking about here. This is South Prairie Creek in South Prairie, and it gets all the way up into moderate flood stage as we go into Wednesday morning through Wednesday midday and into Thursday morning. It's up in moderate flood stage, and that's interesting because it's not a very big creek there, obviously, but it's decent, and moderate flood stage for South Prairie Creek is pretty significant. So keep a note for that. You can see how you have that secondary rise again there, that kind of 1-2 signature, and then this is really worth noting, the Carbon River up at Fairfax, and you can't get up to this area right now because of the closure of Highway 165 because the Fairfax Bridge is poor condition, but you can see again that 1-2 kind of crest there, so it crests as we go into Tuesday morning, and then it goes down, and then you kind of get down toward about Tuesday afternoon. You get back toward Bankful, and then it rises back up again almost to major flood stage as we go into Wednesday. And this river has not gotten this high in a long time. It's probably a good thing that Highway 165 is closed going up toward Mowich Lake, because this is super dangerous. This river can be extremely dangerous to people. You can see all the way through Wednesday it's pretty high, and then it starts to go back down as we go into Thursday and Friday. The Puyallup River near Orting may reach its highest level since the floods of 1996, which is pretty significant. The 1996 and 2006 floods are kind of what we're comparing this to for the Puyallup River's forecast, which that's pretty significant to say. So the Puyallup River, right now, it shows it almost getting to the all-time record, which is very concerning to see, because we can kind of look at what that means here. This is the first river we've come across looking through these here on the stream that has shown getting very, very close to its all-time record. So if we look at this here, so major flood stage is 16,000 cubic feet per second of discharge. And when that happens, the Puyallup River will cause major flooding from Orting downstream through McMillan to Sumner. Swift and deep flood waters will inundate roads, residential areas, and farms. Erosion will likely damage levees. Flooding will occur all along the river, including headwaters, tributaries, and other streams within and near the Puyallup River basin. That is significant, folks. That is not good to see for the Puyallup River basin. There you can see how the record is 21,500 cubic feet per second. It's forecast to crest Wednesday morning there at 21,424 cubic feet per second. I mean, that is huge. And then it peaks again there as we go into Wednesday night, maybe into Thursday morning. So just some really interesting stuff showing up for the Puyallup River there. And then if we go look one downstream there to the Puyallup River in downtown Puyallup, this one is forecast to get almost to moderate flood stage, which would be the highest it's gotten since 1996, and that was, for those that remember, a major flood for the Pacific Northwest. I've heard about how that happened. So you can see Puyallup River rises above flood stage for the first time since 2020 as we go into Tuesday morning, and then drops back down as we go into Tuesday night, but then rises and remains in flood stage from Wednesday morning all the way into Thursday. And Thursday morning there you can see then by Thursday afternoon it decreases and drops out of action stage there by Thursday night. But again, a pretty long duration event, and then you see that 1-2 again there on the Puyallup River. As we move further south, we still have multiple rivers that are in major flood stage. So the Nisqually River near National, Washington, so that is above the Alder Dam, and that's why there's not as much flooding further down the Nisqually River there. But you can see the Nisqually River there getting up to moderate flood stage as we go into Tuesday morning, then dropping back down to minor flood stage, and then goes back up into major flood stage for the first time in a while there as we go into Wednesday morning, and peaks there as we go into early Thursday morning before very slowly taking a long time to get out of the flood stage there by the time we get to Friday morning. So that's a pretty big flood there for the Nisqually River getting up well into major flood stage on this forecast. And then the Cowlitz River, both at Packwood and then down in Randall, gets into major flood stage there. And you can see the Cowlitz River at Packwood approaching its all-time record. Forecast to get to 13.8 feet. Record is 14.6 feet, so you're coming in just shy of a foot from that all-time record. It gets into major flood stage twice. Again, you see that 1-2 signature with the atmospheric river flooding there. And this is kind of something we've noted here, that as we've moved further south in this forecast, we started up at the Nooksack and Skagit rivers there, where you have the first round having more flooding. As you move further south, that second round has more flooding, and it lasts a little bit longer. And that's something we're going to have to watch. If that second round of the atmospheric river comes in stronger than expected for parts of western Washington, then we could kind of revise some of these flooding forecasts. So here for the Cowlitz River up in Packwood, just down from White Pass there, you can see it first gets into major flood stage as we go into early Tuesday morning, then drops back out as we go to Tuesday night, then rises back into major flood stage by early Wednesday morning and remains there just shy of a foot from the all-time record all the way into Thursday midday before dropping and getting out of flood stage by the time we get to Friday morning. And then if we look down at the Cowlitz River in Randall, this kind of shows that as you get further south, that 1-2 signature goes away a little bit, and we can look at why that happens here in just a second. So this is the Cowlitz River at Randall. Again, just shy of a foot from the all-time record. It starts rising as we go through tomorrow, gets above major flood stage Tuesday morning, remains above major flood stage all the way to Friday night. And so that could be a pretty significant flood there down in Randall. And you can see we can look here at what happens when the Cowlitz River is in major flood stage there along the US 12 corridor. I'm not entirely familiar with this area. I've been through there once, but so 22 feet is major flood stage. It gets a little bit higher than that. So you can see here the Cowlitz River at 22 feet will cause major flooding from the vicinity of Randall downstream through Reef Lake, with dangerous inundation of many roads, including US 12, residential and commercial areas and farms. Flooding will occur all along the river, including headwaters, tributaries, and other streams within and near the Cowlitz River Basin. So that's pretty significant. Admittedly, I don't know that area very well, but it does sound like this could be a pretty bad flood for there. And then we also are going to look over here near Chehalis. So what happens is you get all these rivers kind of converge in the Chehalis area. So starting here with the Newacum River near Chehalis, this is very interesting. It's forecast to get into moderate flood stage and go up twice. So it gets to moderate flood stage for the first time as we go into Tuesday morning, then drops back down to minor flood stage for Tuesday night. And then as we go into Wednesday morning, it gets into moderate flood stage and remains there all the way through Thursday afternoon before dropping out of flood stage as we go into Friday. And one thing to note here, it's supposed to crest at 205.29 feet. The record is 205.5 feet. So you're looking at 0.2 feet from the all-time record there on the Newacum River. This is a newer gauge, so you don't have as long a period of record there, but it's still significant nonetheless. So we can look at kind of what happens there at 205.5 feet, which is that all-time record. Floodwaters will inundate most roads and a majority of residential and commercial areas within the region. Swift floodwaters will become deep and hazardous, especially near river channels. A stage of 205.5 feet on the Newacum River there corresponds to Phase 4 in the Lewis County flood system, and flooding will occur all along the river, including headwaters, forks, and tributaries and other streams within the basin. So this is the last time this happened. We got that record crest there on January 6th, 2022, and that I believe I-5 flooded that day. So that's something kind of to note, that we may be getting close to the territory where if you get some of all the things happening at the same time, you may get very close to having some potential flooding on I-5. The Skookumchuck River near Bucota, Washington. I had someone in the chat yesterday talking about this one. This is going to get up into moderate flood stage, it looks like. But this is a little bit later. You can see it doesn't get up into moderate flood stage until Wednesday and then remains there through Thursday and then starts to drop off as we go through Friday into the weekend. So not getting too close to the all-time record there on the Skookumchuck, but it is going to be, that's a pretty significant flood. And all of that drains into the Chehalis River, and we can look at the gauge here near Grand Mound. You can see a prolonged flood for the Chehalis River, getting up above flood stage for the first time Tuesday night, remaining above flood stage all the way through Saturday morning, and then starting to drop down. So you can see it's a pretty long flood for the Chehalis. And then you can see we are going to have potentially some flooding all the way down on the Cowlitz River near Kelso. I had some people in the chat here from Kelso yesterday, and you can see that forecast shows potentially getting into minor flood stage, which is kind of significant considering there's like three dams that the river has to, two dams the river has to go through to even get to Kelso. So that's kind of worth noting. And then the Grays River out near Roseburg, Washington, that may flood as well. It looks like there's already a flood warning out because National Weather Service in Portland is issuing those flood warnings. And then something to note over here for anyone watching in eastern Washington, the Yakima River, both at Easton in the canyon and then the Natchez River in Natchez and up near Cliffdale, will get into minor flood stage. So we can look at the we'll look at the Yakima River up near Easton. You probably see it there if you go over Snoqualmie Pass. Here you can see that there. You get that kind of 1-2 signature again on the Yakima River. First getting into flood stage there Tuesday morning, going back down out of flood stage Tuesday night, and then getting it again into minor flood stage all the way through Wednesday into Thursday. So that's something to note there for anyone in eastern Washington. You can see that flood continues down through the city of Yakima itself, and then you got that flooding lasting through, looks like, Wednesday into Friday there on the Yakima River, and then all the way down toward the Tri-Cities where it comes into the Columbia River. That's, again, a prolonged flood there on the Yakima River lasting all the way into this weekend. So thank you, guys. Thank you there in the chat there. Gloria P8092, thank you for your generosity. Thank you very much for the super chat there. Let me see if I got any questions in here real quick. Jarbs58 says, lived in the Snoqualmie Valley during the 1990 flood. So many homes were damaged. That is, the 1990 flood is the all-time record up at Snoqualmie Falls, and nothing has even come close to that ever since. So the 1990 flood is... We can actually look at that here on the Snoqualmie River page, because obviously the Snoqualmie Valley is one of the biggest river valleys we have in the Northwest. And this is something to watch for these folks in the Snoqualmie Valley. You can see at 59 feet, major flood stage is 58 feet. We're going to get up to 59 here. The record is 62. So at 58, the Snoqualmie River causes major flooding from Fall City downstream through Carnation and Duval. Deep and swift floodwaters inundate many farms, residential areas, and roads. Flooding will occur along the river, including headwaters, tributaries, and other streams within and near the Snoqualmie River Basin. So if we want to look at that 1990 flood, November 1990 was 60.7 feet. This one is forecast to be at 59, so pretty close. And it's not, of course, I don't want to compare it outright to 1990 because that was a huge event, obviously. But it's still significant to see something getting above major flood stage once, let alone twice. So that's a pretty interesting thing to see there for the Snoqualmie River. And then there's also a few rivers kind of in the Seattle metro that will be getting much higher than they usually are. For example, the Cedar River there in Renton, you can see the Cedar River gets above bank full stage as we go into Monday night, remains there through the week, and then by Thursday morning, you're getting up into almost to minor flood stage there on the Cedar River, right there in downtown Renton, right by the Renton Airport, and it continues in bank full stage all the way through the weekend. And then, of course, a couple other ones, they are controlled by dams further upstream, but it's still worth noting. So the Green River in Auburn here, this is just down the hill from me from Federal Way. You can see it is way above what it usually is already, up to about halfway to action stage on this graph. But you can see the Green River gets to bank full as we go into Tuesday morning, remains there all the way through Friday, and then stays pretty high going up into next week. And then the White River there, also in Auburn, getting almost to, you could basically say that it's going to be in minor flood stage. And this is the first time in quite a while that that's happened. You can see some rises there on the White River, going to continue to rise all the way into getting above bank full stage, right there on, that would be Wednesday or Thursday morning, and then remaining, getting up, cresting at flood stage there as we go into Friday morning, and then starting to slowly go back down, but it's going to take a sweet time getting down there. So overall, I mean, we just went through a lot of rivers, and we have a few that are getting close to record amounts. We have some that are not close to records, but flooding for the first time in a long time. So if you guys have any questions about a specific river or a specific area, please put it in the chat there. I will definitely go into as much depth as you guys want on certain rivers. We can even look at maps and stuff. So let me take a look here in the chat real quick, see what's going on. Brian Rock, Rail Fan, says water from Toutle North and South Fork comes into the Cowlitz River. Yeah, that I remember hearing that, because when we talk about Mount St. Helens erupting, all that water went into the Cowlitz and then out into the Columbia River. And then unofficial Washington State wildfire alert. Thank you for joining, my friend. Yeah, stream is going well. No need to unmute. Well, enjoy your meal. And then Jarbs58 says greetings from Centralia. Greetings. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride here in Centralia. That's for sure. Puget Sound Stormwatch, thank you for joining. Going to be commuting from Tacoma here in a moment. Take care, everyone in the stream. Live, he'll be doing some live coverage tomorrow morning. Yeah, go check out Anthony's channel tomorrow morning there. Yeah, Puget Sound Stormwatch, as Gloria P says there, Puget Sound Stormwatch is a very good source for weather information there. All right, 964 America there says, tell me about the Puyallup River and its flood stage. Well, we were looking earlier at the Puyallup River in Orting, likely going to get to its highest level since some of the significant flooding of 2006. Some people probably remember that in here. That was the end of the Carbon River Road in Mount Rainier National Park back in 2006 there. So the Puyallup River in Orting, it looks like we're having a little bit of a hard time loading it. There we go. So we're basically potentially looking at record flooding for the Puyallup River in Orting, and this is, out of all the rivers we've looked at here on the stream so far, this is the first that has, it looks like it actually has a decent chance of potentially beating its record. So you can see the Puyallup River gets above major flood stage in Orting there as we go into Monday night, so that's tomorrow night into early Tuesday morning. And then it goes down to getting out of flood stage by Tuesday night. So it's a pretty quick up and down there. And then as you go back into Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, we maybe will reach that record, that all-time record there at the Puyallup River in Orting. And then it goes down a little bit, but comes back up as we go into Wednesday night, stays in major flood stage all the way through the day Wednesday before slowly getting down and out of flood stage as we go into Thursday and Friday. So, and then if we're looking at the Puyallup River, they're down in downtown Puyallup. This hasn't flooded at all since 2020, and you're going to see we got a little bit of a prolonged period in flood stage there. You get above flood stage there Tuesday, drops back down, and then in downtown Puyallup you get above flood stage from Wednesday all the way through as we go into Thursday, and it peaks there almost at moderate flood stage Thursday morning before starting to drop off as we go into Friday. So that's the Puyallup River. That's what we're looking at here. Big flooding potential around Orting and McMillan down towards Sumner. Let's see. Columbia River in the gorge. The Columbia River basically won't flood because it can't really. There are too many dams on the Columbia River to allow it to flood. You may see the Columbia River rise. The closest gauge we have to the gorge here is the Columbia River at Vancouver, Washington. It's still controlled by the tide here. You can see it will rise significantly. The influence of the tide becomes less as the river gets higher, but flood stage on the Columbia is 16 feet. It's going to get to about 9.5. So that is not at flood stage there, but it will definitely be noticeably higher. I see a couple of you guys talking about the wind. We'll take a look at the wind in just a moment here. Issaquah River is going to minor. Yeah, we'll take a look at the Issaquah Creek there in downtown Issaquah. Right now, forecast to be an action stage, but I've seen this rise really fast before, and maybe we'll get higher than this. But you can see it looks like the peak on the Issaquah River there is going to be Wednesday afternoon and evening and into early Thursday morning. So Issaquah Creek there Wednesday looks like your potential highest time there. But then again, this could get higher than expected there for the Issaquah River, or Issaquah Creek, sorry. CC, thank you for the generosity there. Thank you for the super chat, and welcome as a member. Thank you very much there. So here is Issaquah Creek at Issaquah there. You can see it's going to rise pretty noticeably over tomorrow. Then it kind of levels off Tuesday. Then as the atmospheric river moves back in, you get Issaquah Creek really rising as we go into Wednesday and early Thursday morning, getting up toward action stage, which you could say that's about, looking at 1,400 cubic feet per second, so spilling over its banks into low flood-prone areas of the valley. So that is kind of what you're looking at for Issaquah Creek, and it may get higher than that. We'll see how it plays out. With the Snoqualmie River getting so big, just pretty close to it, I wouldn't be surprised to see some higher amounts there on Issaquah Creek. Someone else here says, one of my friends lives near Carnation. Is there anything you do to suggest they should do in regards for preparation. Living in Carnation, I'm not sure if Carnation, the town itself, can actually like flood, but anyone around Carnation, for one, should be really prepared for road closures and having a very difficult time getting around with the Snoqualmie River going in a major flood stage. One thing I do know from chasing a decent amount of floods down there is it's pretty hard to get around the valley because the roads that cross the valley close very quickly, and then you have to go on either 202 or 203 and then try to get in and around to get to some of the towns in there. So be careful, long commutes probably. And then just your kind of standard things when you're preparing for a potential flood. Be ready to evacuate if you have to, just like with a wildfire. Be ready to evacuate. Maybe have some sandbags if you really think your house is in a flood-prone area. And obviously the best way you can figure that out is go and talk to your city authorities and see if your city has a website and stuff like that that can help you determine what area in the city could flood. Counties also have that kind of website too, and that really goes for anybody, not just Carnation, but any areas around here that we're talking about with flooding. So let me see up here. Yeah, let me look through the chat here. Been through a few 100-year floods since 1996. Jarb says there from Centralia. Yeah, some of that area has been hit pretty hard over the last few years. Let's see, did you already discuss the Skagit River at Mount Vernon? We did, but let's look at it again. So the Skagit River and Mount Vernon going to get up into major flood stage. The interesting thing here about the Skagit River is that it is the largest river by volume in the Northwest. That's not the Columbia River, and it's not even really that close. So when the Skagit River gets into major flood stage, you're looking at 92,000 cubic feet per second of discharge on the river, which is huge. That's just a crazy amount of water. So there's a ton of water coming down through the Skagit Valley. And it looks like your peak on the Skagit River is going to be getting up into Bankful as we go into Tuesday morning. That crest is Tuesday night into early Wednesday, and then it starts to drop down as we go into Wednesday night, but then rises back up into minor flood stage as we go into Thursday before finally dropping out of Bankful by the time we get to Friday night. So, Catherine, hopefully that answers your question about the Skagit River near Mount Vernon. We can real quick look at what happens when the Skagit River reaches 32 feet. So it says here, it will cause major flooding from Sedro-Woolley downstream through Mount Vernon to the mouth. Deep and swift floodwaters inundate many roads, farmlands, and residential areas. Flooding will occur all along the river, including headwaters, tributaries, and other streams within and near the Skagit River Basin. So I, living in Federal Way and chasing mainly around the going to see floods in the rivers around me and up in the Snoqualmie Valley, I'm not too familiar with what areas get closed when the Skagit River gets to this level, but I would assume that it's a decent amount of roads, especially to the west of Mount Vernon. I'm sure that we'll get to see those Mount Vernon flood walls in action again, which I have to say is pretty cool. That's pretty cool that the city of Mount Vernon has developed something like that. Let's see, Brian Rock, rail fan, asking about the rails. Is BNSF Seattle sub going to get messed up because of flooding or landslides? Very possible. Our landslide index is going to rise quite a bit. Let me see if I can find that website. Here we go. This is the antecedent wetness index. It's our it's how we monitor landslides. And I'm trying to see if we can find the I think this is what we want here. Yeah, so this is basically it's kind of a weird graph here, but this is the landslide scale. So when you get any of the icons above, so out here where my cursor is, from this line, you have a pretty high landslide risk. And you can see you have the bold icons and then the lighter shaded icons. The lighter shaded icons are forecast in 24 hours. So this is only looking through Monday there, but you can see that we're getting closer to that line already as we get out into Monday. So my guess is we will have a decent amount of landslide risk. And then, Brian, to answer your question, that landslide risk does impact the Seattle subdivision there of the BNSF Railway. That also impacts the N line of the Sounder and the Amtrak Cascade service to Vancouver, BC, and points in between there. So if any railroad is going to be impacted, it will be that area. We have to wait and see if there are going to be landslides in that region, but it has happened at a decent amount of points in the past here, so watch out for that. If you're taking the N line for the Sounder, or if you're taking Amtrak, delays are possible. Both for Amtrak, both from Seattle northward and then potentially south of Olympia, if we have any flooding in the Chehalis River Valley, that will close the Amtrak line really quickly. So that's something to note here. Just a second, let me take a drink of water, you guys. All right, let me catch up here. Good evening from Bellingham. Good evening, Keith. Thank you for joining us. Green River in Tukwila. Let's take a look at that. I don't think there's a specific gauge that's going to give us a forecast for the Green River in Tukwila. We can look at, here's a gauge for it, but it doesn't have a flood category forecast. This is actually just looking at observed. You can see it's risen quite a bit there. The closest forecast point we can get for you for the Green River in Tukwila is the Green River in Auburn. And so let's see here. So this is the Green River in Auburn, and you can see it's rising quite significantly right now through the day today. It's gotten a few feet higher today, actually. And then you can see as we go through tomorrow, it gets higher there, and then we get above bank full stage on the Green River in Auburn Tuesday morning, about 10 a.m., and then it continues to rise as we go into Thursday afternoon, and then it starts to go back down under that action stage, but remains very full there still relative to normal as we go through next week. So for the Green River in Tukwila, I would say your highest amounts or highest river conditions are going to be from Tuesday evening all the way through Saturday. So just be careful out there. Let's see. Catherine says in the chat, live in Bellingham and teach in Mount Vernon. The I-5 landslides impacted school staffing. Oh, yeah, the landslides on I-5 by Alger there. Yeah, that can be a problem. Thankfully, Whatcom County's not going to get too significant with the rain. It looks like we will. Yeah, Keith's saying there in the chat, the Nooksack River in Ferndale will be an action stage. We can look at that real quick. I didn't actually look at the Nooksack River's value. We talked about it. I didn't actually open it. So let's open that up here. So the Nooksack River in Ferndale, for anyone in Whatcom County, nothing even remotely close due to the horrific 2021 floods that we had. If anything, most of the rain will be directed south of Whatcom County here. So this is the Nooksack River in Ferndale there. You can see it gets above bank full as we go to 4 a.m. Tuesday, remains there as we go toward Tuesday evening, and then by Wednesday morning we're back out of that bank full. In comparison, folks, in 2021, you got up to the staggering amount of 24 feet there, and here we're getting to about 16. So it will be, the Nooksack River will be high. It won't be super significant. Yeah, Whatcom County Weather will be talking about this tonight. Yeah, Randy Small, Whatcom County Weather, another great local YouTube channel and Facebook group. Randy is a super awesome guy, and the folks that work with him on Whatcom County Weather are really great people too. So go and check them out. Especially if you're up in Whatcom County, there is quite literally no better source anywhere for Whatcom County Weather than Randy Small. So go and check him out if you're up there. Mark says, how bad are the rains for British Columbia? Not bad. You can see here, Vancouver going to get, I can actually, if we have any Canadians in the chat, I'm doing this for you guys. We'll put this into millimeters. Yeah, so let's put this into millimeters here for our Canadians in the chat. You're looking about 48 millimeters of rain there for Surrey, BC, up toward about 78 millimeters there for Abbotsford, and then 40 to 60 millimeters there across Vancouver itself. Nanaimo getting about 35. The winners for rainfall in British Columbia are going to be Victoria, about 75 millimeters, and then out along the strait toward Port Renfrew and all that, over 100 millimeters out there, but that's nothing too significant. So that's your rain for BC, not too bad. The mountains of British Columbia get maybe up toward 4 inches. So you will see rises on the rivers, but you're not going to see any crazy flooding or anything like that. So now I saw you guys asking about the wind. So let's take a look at that wind forecast for tomorrow. Let me see where I have that here. Okay, so this is the European model, and we'll look at that wind potential. And again, kind of why that's happening. We looked at this earlier. Is if we rewind this to, let's go to the surface pressure here. All right, so as we go through Monday, you can see we kind of have what's going on here is you got low pressure to our north, you got the atmospheric river moving in, and high pressure to the south. That ridge to our south is what is gonna contrast with this low that fuels the atmospheric river. All of this combines to create this pressure gradient across Oregon and then strongest up through Washington and British Columbia. That's what brings some gusty winds tomorrow. So to start us off, we do have a wind advisory in effect, and we will read through that wind advisory right here from the National Weather Service. So this is for basically, this one is for the coast and the strait, winds up to 50 miles per hour, and then this one is for the entirety of the lowlands and parts of the Hood Canal area and stuff like that, gusts up to 45 miles per hour. That's in effect from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday. So that's your wind advisory. And then also, if anyone's watching in Southwest Washington in the Willamette Valley, 35 to 45 miles per hour down there. So going back here to the wind forecast on the European model, we'll go into Monday morning and then through the day Monday. The European model showing a decent round of wind, nothing too significant. You can see gusts of 40 to 45 miles per hour on the European model for areas around the Puget Sound, maybe a little bit higher out by Shelton and Bremerton there, maybe 45 to 50 miles per hour. The coast getting 40 to 45 miles per hour, and then the northwest interior, you can see there around Bellingham, maybe getting up toward 50 miles per hour. But this is really nothing extraordinary, and even with our decent windstorm that we got on Friday night, where you had some gusts up toward 50 to 55 miles per hour across parts of the lowlands, we didn't get a huge amount of power outages. We got about 13,000 with PSE, 7,000 with Seattle City Light. Respectable numbers, but pretty garden variety of a storm. Now, if we look at some of the higher resolution forecasts, this paints a little bit of a different picture. Some of these winds, if you believe these higher resolution forecasts, we could maybe get a few more power outages. We may have a similar strength storm to what we had on Friday night. So you can see here on the NAM model, this is one of our higher resolution forecasts. This is showing winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour for Shelton and Bremerton, and then Seattle and Tacoma and Olympia gusting 45 to 50 miles per hour. Same thing up in Bellingham. Then the coast gusting 50 to 60 miles per hour, especially around the Long Beach Peninsula. This is on the higher side, but it is worth noting that it's possible, especially given how poorly the forecast models behaved and picked things up with the previous storm there Friday night. I mean, even the higher gust potentials on some of the forecast models were not even close to what we ended up getting. Like, for example, Friday night, the NAM model here was our highest forecast in terms of gusts, showed 45 miles per hour or so around the Seattle area, and we got up to 50 miles per hour. So that is a big difference, believe it or not. In the chat here, a question, do you think the saturation in the soil could play a role when comparing to Friday night? Yes, I definitely think it could, and if we do end up getting these winds gusting up almost to 50 miles per hour across parts of western Washington, we will probably get more tree damage, relatively speaking, tomorrow than we did on Friday. Will it be super significant? Probably not, but because again, we had some bigger storms back in October and early November that took a lot of the leaves off the trees already, and therefore made it so that there's not much left to fall except maybe some lingering unhealthy or diseased trees. So we may have a little bit more in terms of power outages. Another thing to note here for folks out in eastern Washington, looking at Pullman potentially gusting up toward 55 to 60 miles per hour. Tomorrow, same thing in Spokane, 55 miles per hour or so down in the Tri-Cities. So you have less of a risk of power outages out here, more of a risk of really dangerous driving conditions on some of the big, wide-open highways out there in eastern Washington, and maybe even some blowing dust if it's not raining. So heads up for that across eastern Washington there, especially from Moses Lake eastward on I-90 and then down in the Tri-Cities and in parts of the Palouse. We have one more high-resolution forecast we can look at. This is the high-resolution rapid refresh model, and we can look at this one, put it all the way out through tomorrow. And again, it's kind of painting that similar picture to the NAM model. So both these higher resolution forecasts showing those winds gusting 45 to 55 miles per hour on the coast and then 45 to 50 miles per hour there in the lowlands. The high resolution rapid refresh a little bit lower around Seattle, showing 40 to 45 instead of 45 to 50. That is a difference. That is something to note. Showing about 50 miles per hour in Everett, 50 in Shelton, and then 45 miles per hour near Olympia. So it does look like it'll be windy tomorrow. How much damage we get kind of depends on if those winds are more 35 to 45 or 45 to 50, because the latter there is a little bit stronger. And then again, that Spokane down to Pullman area really showing up on some of these high resolution forecasts with some big gusts out there. I mean, 57 miles an hour in Shelton, 55 in Pullman, and these the shading to the north and the east of Pullman there is up towards 60 miles per hour. So that is that's something to note. If you are out in those areas, watch out for crosswinds. Watch out for stuff blowing around out there in parts of eastern Washington. Let me get a drink here real quick and got to plug something in as well. All right, so now let's see, what else can we take a look at? We're almost to when the European model is going to run. I don't know if we will take a look at that. We can look at the hazardous rainfall outlook here, the excessive rainfall outlook from the Weather Prediction Center. So day 2, this is going to be your excessive rainfall outlook for Monday. Now, what is the excessive rainfall outlook, you may ask? This is the basically showing the areas where there's the highest chance of, I guess you could say, flash flooding. I don't like to use that term in the Northwest because that really only impacts areas in burn scars, of which they're not really going to be impacted, or if they are, there's not really anyone around them. So you can see here your highest risk of excessive rainfall on Monday is up and down the Cascades, up and down the Coast Range, and then in the interior between, say, Vancouver, Washington, and Grand Mound, Washington, up towards Shelton and Olympia a little bit there too. Going into day 3, that's Tuesday, atmospheric river pushes south a little bit. You get that marginal risk across western Washington, and then from the Thurston-Lewis County line southward down toward Eugene and Cottage Grove, Oregon, you get that excessive rainfall outlook in the slight risk category. Atmospheric river pushes back north a little bit as we go into Wednesday, and then you see that excessive rainfall outlook include the Washington Cascades once again, scraping parts of Tacoma and Olympia, and then going down toward Salem, Oregon there, and then the Coast Range of Washington and Oregon as well. And then as we go into Thursday, you can see that outlook then only includes mainly western Washington and then down into the marginal category. So things really do kind of wrap up as we go into Thursday. Another thing we can look at is the University of Washington's forecast model here. This is known as the WRF. Is pretty high resolution, and you can see some pretty interesting precipitation trends on it. And sometimes it's pretty accurate, sometimes it misses a little bit. But it's always good to look at all the forecast models and kind of figure out what you're looking at here. So this is the highest resolution forecast I could grab here from the WRF model. This is run by the University of Washington Atmospheric Sciences Department, of which I am now a part of, so that's pretty fun. So this is the forecast through 4 a.m. Wednesday, and you can see we're looking at the highest resolution forecast we have available to us here in the Northwest through the University of Washington forecast model here. So what you're looking at is basically areas from Seattle southward there through Wednesday getting around 2.5 to 3 inches of rain. You can see some areas in the Cascades just through Wednesday getting up toward 10 inches of rain, and the atmospheric river still has to push back north and move through the area again. And then the coast even getting up to 3 to 5 inches of rain just by Wednesday morning. So definitely a lot of rain coming here. But what else you can see is this model, what it is really good at is terrain features. I mean, there is no model that can better show where our terrain is than this one because the resolution is so high. And you can see how you get this really interesting rain shadowing from both the Olympics and the mountains on Vancouver Island. If any Canadians are in the chat, I would appreciate knowing the official name, if there is one, for the mountains down the middle of Vancouver Island. Because I would love to use the proper name. So Canadians in the chat, please let me know what the official name of the mountains on Vancouver Island are. So you can see there from Seattle northward up toward Whidbey Island, the atmospheric river moving in from the west there really drops off the rain totals downwind of it, because an atmospheric river is at low elevations, and as it hits mountains, you have this thing that's called orographic lift. And essentially, we can probably find a schematic of it here. Let's see if we can. Oh, this is a pretty good image here. This one should work. Let's use this. So here, this is a really good forecast, or a very good graphic here of what orographic lift is. So you can basically think of this as the atmospheric river. So here's your atmospheric river right here. You get these windward slopes that are exposed to the atmospheric river, and then as the air rises, it condenses and dumps all of its rainfall on the windward sides. This is why the Cascades are greener and wetter in Seattle, and then it's way drier as you go over toward Ellensburg. And you can basically think of the atmospheric river, you just have a lot more rain, and it's at pretty low elevations, and it rises up and kind of gets condensed. It's basically like wringing out a sponge, and that's what you have happening here with these atmospheric rivers. And then on the other side, you have this rain shadow region that is where you have that dry descending air, and you get much less rain. So that's what you're looking at here. You have it getting wrung out here over the Olympic Mountains and over Vancouver Island, and then on the other side of that, you get way less rain, and it's probably a little bit more exaggerated here on the University of Washington's model, but you can even see it here on the European model. For example, you get less rain on the other side of the Olympics and on the other side of the Vancouver Island mountains there than you do on the windward sides. You can see it here on the Cascades versus what you have over in eastern Washington. So it's pretty interesting to see how that kind of works, how that plays out, how you have more rain on one side than the other, and again, because of that orographic lift. Let me catch up on some of the chat here. Whatcom County weather will be live tonight. Nice. Will there be damaging winds in Bellevue tomorrow? 35 to 45 miles per hour. Not damaging, nothing to sneeze at, but not like super damaging that will be causing a bunch of problems. Any chance for school cancellations due to wind? No, I don't think so, unless you have individual schools maybe that lose power, but that in itself is not super likely. Paul Davis says, nice explanation of the landslide risk graphic. It's not intuitive. Yeah, that's for sure. It is really, it's not an intuitive graphic at all. Really kind of a weird one to figure out. But you know when there's going to be landslides. It's still just kind of an annoying graphic. Miss Queso there, thank you for your insights. Of course, I'm very glad to provide this for you guys. Thank you very much for your generosity. Let's continue here. We can see if we get any update to the river forecasts. Let's reload here. I don't think we'll get an update on these tonight. We'll maybe get one in time for tomorrow morning's video. But yeah, right now, basically what we're looking at, and this is pretty significant, that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different rivers that will get potentially into major flood stage at the same time. And then you have an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 there that get into moderate flood stage, in addition to a few that get into minor flood stage. So really, this is one of our biggest flooding events in quite a while here. And it'll be noticeable, especially if you live near any of these rivers. You got to know what to do in terms of flooding and stuff like that, and you got to be prepared. We do have one river that's already starting to flood, and this will come as a shock to absolutely no one who keeps up frequently with Washington weather here. It's the Skokomish River near Potlatch over by Hood Canal, already up at Bankfull. It's going to go back down a little bit, then going to really rise and up into a moderate flood stage there as we go into, let's see, Monday night into Tuesday, and then stays in flood stage all the way through Thursday evening there, and then remains in bank full stage like all the way into like next week. So I'm not at all surprised that that's happening. That river has a very low tolerance for rainfall. A river we didn't look at here was the Tolt River Incarnation. This floods somewhat frequently. It is controlled by one of the dams, but it's still, you can see huge rises potentially on the Tolt River. And I've always thought that the water in the Tolt River when it's flooding moves really, really fast. I don't know why. I've just kind of observed that. So you can see Tolt River gets up to moderate flood stage as we get into Tuesday morning, then drops all the way down out of flood stage by Tuesday night, and then rises again and peaks there on Wednesday morning or Wednesday evening, then drops as we go through Thursday. Again, we may push that timing around a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of this flooding move back by 12 hours or so. So that's something to watch for. Another thing we can take a look at is our simulated radar. So we can pull that up here. We'll use the NAM model first, and we can take a look at what we see there. So this is tonight. You can see we have some of these showers moving through the area. We can actually, let's check in on those showers real quick. It looks like we got some showers moving toward Olympia there, maybe moving toward Tacoma, but nothing really significant there. So getting back to our radar, you can see as we go into about 6 a.m. there, it's 7, 8, or actually, no, 6 a.m. is when it's going to start. So 6 a.m. there across parts of Tacoma and Olympia, Shelton, Bremerton, Seattle, that rain starts to move in. It gets heavier as we get into 8 a.m., and then you just get rain all day. And some of that you get this rain shadow there basically from Seattle to Everett, so it may be dry in some of those areas. That fills in a little bit as we go into the evening. Heavy rain continues into 9 p.m. Then you see that atmospheric river push out of the area down in toward Oregon by the time we get to 5 a.m. Tuesday. Through that time, we get about an inch to an inch and a half, maybe a little bit more for parts of the Seattle metro, especially south of the city, and even more rain up in the mountains. We can compare this to the high-resolution rapid refresh model. Look at that simulated radar here. Usually this one's actually a little bit more accurate. You can see it shows some of those showers almost perfectly, showing what we're looking at right now here at 9 p.m. And then as we go into tomorrow morning, you see that rain start to move into the area as we go to about 6 a.m. Then we get moderate rain across western Washington all the way through the day. Again, that rain shadow from Seattle to Everett, but areas north and south get rain, fills in as we go into Monday night. You get that heavy rain continuing through Monday evening. And then see barely any snow. You get some brief snow maybe up in the Cascades, but it lasts for an hour or two, and then it will melt promptly. That rain moves out of the area by Tuesday morning into Portland. And you can see total rain through that time. You're looking at almost 2 inches for areas south of Seattle tomorrow. So it's going to be a pretty wet day. And one thing you're going to really have to watch out for is standing water and stuff like that on the roads. It's going to be pretty noticeable, that's for sure. So watch out for that. You can see the coast getting up toward 2.5 inches of rain there as well. So really a lot of stuff going on here. Even the mountains getting 4 to 5 inches. And that's why you get that flooding as soon as tomorrow night, because you're getting up to 5 to 6, maybe up to 8 inches in the Cascades just in 24 hours. And that is really significant. And then you can see, I don't know if we will be able to see it as far as this forecast goes out, but there, yeah, see, as we go into Tuesday midday, the rain starts to move back north, and then the next round of rain moves in by Tuesday evening across western Washington, bringing us more rain as we go all the way out through Wednesday and Thursday, and that rain probably continues all the way into Friday. So that's pretty significant across the region. And we can look at how this is being seen on the atmospheric river category forecast. Starting with the GFS model, you can see it showing up as a category 4 atmospheric river, so not beneficial but not yet super hazardous. I mean, we get a handful of category 4 atmospheric rivers across the West Coast each year. Excuse me, the European model agrees with this, also showing a category 4 atmospheric river for the Washington and Oregon coasts. And now, actually, this is something we can look at here. These are the ensemble forecasts. So you got 50 different ensemble members. You have the control run. It's the one at the bottom here. And then you have all these different other ensembles. There's 50 of them on the European model. Basically, what this is you take your initial conditions that are shown on the control run, and you perturb them 50 different times to get an average and kind of see if there's any outliers or something like that. So what we're seeing here is we're looking at SeaTac Airport, 24-hour precipitation. You can see this first pulse with the atmospheric river bringing some pretty significant rain totals, and then the second pulse not bringing as much because SeaTac Airport will be sheltered a little bit. We can take a look down at, say, JBLM. You see a little bit more there coming with that second pulse. If you go down toward Olympia, that second pulse has even more. So you see clearly the 1-2 with this atmospheric river. As you go north, that kind of 1-2 goes away. So if we go up toward Bellingham, let's go News Bellingham here. You can see you get the 1-2, but they're both the same and not very strong. But then if you go down toward Portland, look at that, just a huge round of rain. It kind of is just one round, and then it ends in Portland sooner than it ends in Seattle. But you're looking at potentially almost 3 inches of rain in 24 hours for Portland, so that's pretty significant. More like 2.5 most likely. Let me check in on the chat here. Mark from Tacoma, good evening. Those rain totals in the mountains are insane. Hoping the river flooding isn't terrible. I also hope it's not terrible, but it looks like it's going to be quite bad. Unfortunately for a lot of people, it does look like this will be a pretty big and not good river flooding event. Missy Price, hi from Chehalis. Yeah, welcome. Chehalis is going to be a wild ride the next few days with all this flooding coming in. So we can look at that again in a minute. Let's see. This is the temperature forecast up at Snoqualmie Pass. You can kind of see here, atmospheric river moves in. Those temperatures go up into the 40s, and then it moves out and moves south of us. Those temperatures drop down a little bit back into the mid-30s, but then as soon as it moves back in, you can see those temperatures skyrocket way back up into the 40s and remain there all the way into Friday. We can look at Stevens Pass as well, so you're looking a little bit higher. And you see the same trend. Highs go up into the low 40s for Stevens Pass, maybe drop down toward freezing Tuesday night, and then just as quickly as they drop down by Tuesday afternoon, they're back up in the mid-40s, and it continues like that all the way down through Friday, through Saturday. So that kind of paints a picture for you. I think we can actually look at Paradise on Mount Rainier on here. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. So Paradise, let's see if it'll click it there. There we go. Still not really what you want to see. So another way we can visualize this, because you can't really tell the temperature difference here, but if we go to the European model and we look at the temperature cross sections, let's zoom out a little bit here. So this is Paradise. This is the surface on the bottom here, where you kind of go from the blue to the much lighter greenish color. That's the freezing line. And you can see at Paradise, it's very much above freezing as we go through the next few days. Drops down very briefly for like 12 hours on Tuesday, maybe even less than that. And then as soon as the atmospheric river moves back in, your freezing line is just gone. And what you're seeing there is that even up at Paradise, 5,400 feet, your snow level's way above that. We have a tool here actually on our weather service page that we can use to look at our snow levels. Let me find it here. Here we go. Major Hurricane, thank you for joining the chat, my friend. Love seeing the Weather Bell stuff. Yeah, Weather Bell's awesome. Weather Bell is what makes it possible for me to do this kind of thing. Mark there says, look at Washington State forecast discussion. Yeah, we'll look at the forecast discussion in just a second here while we're on this page. Minimum snow levels. This is a pretty sad graphic here for anyone who likes snow. You can see Sunday through Monday, your snow level about 4,500 feet. So basically all the passes getting rain. As the atmospheric river moves south as we go through Tuesday, that snow level still is above Snoqualmie Pass, but below Stevens Pass, where there's not going to be much snow to go around because there's not much precipitation. Atmospheric river moves back in, snow level goes way back up Wednesday into Thursday. Look at Thursday into Friday, Wednesday night into Thursday night there. 5,000 to 6,000 feet there as your snow levels, and then going into Thursday, Friday, your snow levels almost up to 7,000 feet. So that's why the river flooding is possible, because you have all this rain and your snow levels are above the passes, above a lot of the river basin most of the time. So Mark said, let's look at the forecast discussion. We can take a look at the forecast discussion here for the Weather Service. We'll start here with our key messages. So Most significant, we'll look at this here. So, a strong atmospheric river will arrive on Monday, bringing extended periods of moderate to heavy rain to western Washington through Wednesday. The most significant change within the last 24 hours has been the shift in the axis of the moisture with this system. At this time, the moisture plume still looks to shift south briefly on Tuesday. However, the latest guidance has it lifting back northward into the area, which is western Washington, Tuesday night into Wednesday. This has resulted in an increase in precipitation totals across the central and south Cascades this afternoon. Well, this will have an impact to river forecast. The overall message is that it will be a wet first half of the week for the region. Areas generally south of Seattle are still expected to see 2.5 to 5 inches of rain in a 72-hour, 3-day period. The Olympics and Cascades are on track to receive 6 to 10 inches of rain, though locally higher amounts across the central and south Cascades of close to 12 inches or potentially even more are possible through late Wednesday night. Wind forecast here, Monday will be windy across the region. Southwesterly winds pick up Monday morning, peak Monday evening, and gradually ease Monday night into Tuesday. Strongest winds are expected along the coast, but expect gusts to 40 to 45 miles per hour in the interior, gusts to 50 to 55 miles per hour possible along the immediate coastline. And then coastal flooding, minor coastal flooding remains possible for Salish Sea coastlines through the first half of the week with high astronomical tides, also known as king tides. While the tides will generally remain or below or just close to thresholds, heightened river flows or wind effects could exacerbate inundation in some spots around high tide. So you do have some localized high tide flooding potentially here. Let's go all the way down to the hydrology section. So now we can look at what they're talking about with the river flooding. So these are the folks that issue the warnings here for the river flooding. A strong atmospheric river will move through the Pacific Northwest Monday through Wednesday, bringing significant heavy rainfall across the area. While there's still some uncertainty in the precipitation amounts with an atmospheric river moving into the region, confidence remains high that a widespread river flooding event will commence late Monday and continue through much of the week. Multiple rivers flowing off the Olympics and the Cascades are forecast to reach minor, moderate, and major flood stage. While uncertainty does remain in regards to the exact flood levels and stages through the next week, it will be critical to monitor the forecast now and through the next 7 days. Additional precipitation is also possible on Thursday into Friday, which may keep rivers elevated through the second half of the week. And with wet antecedent soil solutions, the landslide risk across the region will increase with this system, and there may also be potential impacts to area burn scars as well. Urban and small stream flooding, as well as areas with poor drainage, should be alert to the potential for localized nuisance flooding and ponding on roadways. Low water crossings may become impacted or impassable, and that means anything from like your local bog or swamp or something like that too. Let me catch up on the chat here real quick. So there's your forecast discussion there. It's a good resource, and this is a really well-written forecast discussion from the Weather Service in Seattle. Gabriel Littlewood says, hello from a fellow weather college nerd down at the University of Oregon in Eugene. Seems like we're going to be a bit south of most of the good rain. Yeah, it looks like Eugene is going to be a bit south of the rain there. So Eugene is right here at the bottom of this forecast image. You can see they're about 3/4 of an inch total rain versus you go up toward Portland and get like 4 inches. So yeah, Eugene definitely on the south side of this. I guess that's what Eugene gets for beating the Huskies. They don't get as much rain. Go Dogs, you guys. Sorry. Major Hurricane says, who knows, because the models have continued shifting it south through mainly aiming at Portland, so the southern Willamette Valley will probably miss out on the worst. Yeah, in regards to Eugene, there are areas south of I don't really know the cities all that well, but I know Lane County right here. Eugene not going to get as much rain. You can kind of see that cutoff. That's one of the things with atmospheric rivers is that the cutoff on the south side is usually pretty significant. So you can kind of see that the cutoff is pretty quick. But as Major Hurricane there says in the chat, Eugene is in a slight risk for excessive rainfall Tuesday. Yeah, that's possible. Mark says something about these flooding events that people don't talk about is all the debris that the rivers pour out into Puget Sound. As a boater, it makes it hazardous for a week or two after the event. You always have to watch for logs and trees in the water. That is an extremely good point and something I'm very glad you brought up there, Mark. Every time I go chase river flooding, every time, I'm always amazed by how many logs there are in the rivers and how many trees there are just floating down. I mean, I've seen some just gargantuan logs in there sometimes. I mean, just like 40 plus feet long, just some huge logs there flowing down some of our rivers. And you kind of see them all piled up on the bridges and on the islands in the rivers and stuff after the storm. But you kind of forget how much there is until you see it all floating around. So yeah, if you are a boater out there, that can be pretty hazardous, especially when you have these rivers getting up toward major flood stage and it goes on for multiple days. You wash out a ton of stuff that's been sitting for a long time, especially in your first big flood after the summer season. There's lots of logs and stuff that are left over from previous floods just sitting there, and it all gets picked up and washed away, and then it clogs up our waterways with logs, which is not a huge problem for the big ships and stuff like that. But if you're in a pleasure craft, obviously that's going to be a big deal. You don't want to run over a huge log. And for anyone wondering how driftwood gets to where it is, this is how. You get flooding and you get the logs washing down the rivers, and then it settles on the beaches, whether that be on the ocean or in Puget Sound. Major hurricane there says that 1.42 is for Corvallis and Albany. Yeah, right there. That's Corvallis, Oregon there, and then Salem up here, and then Portland and Vancouver. Mark says if you hit those trees with your yacht or boat, it can rip out your whole prop and shaft and can sink your boat. Anytime you see sink your boat as a potential impact of something, you want to be careful. That sounds pretty bad. I don't know off the top of my head what videos I have that shows this, but I've seen some pretty sbig logs, and you can see it sometimes. I know specifically the Snohomish River, which is what you get when the Snoqualmie and Skykomish combine. That's what comes out in Everett there. You go over it, all the sloughs and stuff on I-5. They actually have to go in there after some of the big storms and use a crane and remove logs because it actually causes danger to the homemaker's trestle there on US 2. And they don't want the weight of all these logs just up against the trestle. My friend Benjamin Yurkovic with Washington Weather Chasers has gotten some good video of that in aftermath of previous storms, that you get all these logs having to be removed from the trestle up there in Snohomish County. All right, let's see here if we can see if the European model's starting to run again here. It is, barely. In the first, 4 frames. Peterstown Stormwatch, welcome back. Back in Milton there, just to my south. You didn't miss too much. We went through basically every single river, and then we talked about the wind forecast and some impacts of flooding, including driftwood and stuff like that comes down the rivers. We talked about the mountain temperatures a bit, kind of recapping for everybody there. European model starting to run now. It's going to take a little bit to run all the way out. Again, if you guys have any questions about specific rivers, put it in the chat there. I'd love to answer your questions about any of these specific rivers we are looking at potentially causing some flooding. Yeah, the euro every hour instead of every 6 hours. It is nice. I kind of forgot that that's how it is. Sometimes I'm just used to what I get here with the Weather Bell service. One thing we can take a look at is all the way out. We can look at our extended forecast here. So let's go here. Let's use this. We can see if the next euro is starting yet. Not yet here. So we'll go to the 12Z euro. So we can look kind of way out into our extended forecast and kind of see the overall pattern we're looking at here. You get the atmospheric river. You see it all moving through there. Then as we go into this weekend, that rain is still out there, and it kind of pushes back through the Puget Sound area with another frontal system coming through next Saturday there into Sunday, bringing another decent round of rain. And then you can see we get this ridging over, looks like you get some of this ridging over California and parts of the Intermountain West, and then you get this troughing over the Gulf of Alaska with consistent low pressure and storms up there. That sets us up to get a lot more rain over the next few weeks here. So you can see as that pattern continues, maybe a little bit more mountain snow, and then potentially even some more atmospheric river signatures setting up here as we go into next week, into that middle to latter half of December there. So we're not out of the woods yet in terms of rain and stuff like that. Mark says in the chat, always curious about the Puyallup River as a Tacoma boater and the White River as well because they converge in Sumner. Yeah, let's take a look at both of those again. We covered the Puyallup River in Ording earlier, and again, for those of you who missed it, the Puyallup River in Ording, we're looking at the latest forecast there. Let me pull it up right here. Latest forecast for the Puyallup River in Ording showed it getting to its all-time record, which I believe was set. Let me pull that up again. I don't remember exactly when that was set. So the Puyallup River getting to its all-time record. We were looking at that earlier. That all-time record was set in the 2006 flood there at the 2006 flood, and it looks like we may be getting close to that in this forecast. So here, this is the Puyallup River in Ording, and you get that flooding from Monday night to Tuesday morning, and that's some big flooding there, major flood stage. You drop out of flood stage by Tuesday night, and then the major flood, it goes back into major flood stage for a second time there around Ording, and stays in major flood stage from Wednesday morning all the way through Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. Barely, like, you're flirting with the record here. I mean, the record is like 12.4, and you're at like 12.3, so it's as close as you can get. And again, we talked about this earlier. When the Puyallup River gets at or above 16,000 cubic feet per second, we're looking at 22,000 almost cubic feet per second. Major flooding from Ording downstream through McMillan to Sumner. Swift and deep floodwaters will inundate roads, residential areas, and farms. Erosion could damage levees. Flooding will occur all along the river, including headwaters, tributaries, and other streams within and near the Puyallup River basin. And then what this leads to is, right here, as we go downstream a little bit, let's see. Here we go. This leads to the Puyallup River in Puyallup getting to its highest level since 1996. Not getting to any records here, but almost getting to moderate flood stage. You have 2 times in minor flood stage for the Puyallup River in downtown Puyallup, which is significant because it hasn't even gotten to minor flood stage since 2020. And here you're looking at it getting above minor flood stage twice in a week. So you see it flooding there, the Puyallup River, from Tuesday morning into midday. Drops out of flood stage by Tuesday night, and then way back up here almost to moderate flood stage through the day Wednesday into early Thursday, and then finally gets out of bank full by the time we get to Thursday night. So that, Mark, you were asking about the Puyallup River. There's probably going to be a lot of debris coming down the Puyallup River. I mean, this may be one of the biggest floods we've seen on the Puyallup River in 30 years. So that'll be interesting to watch for sure. That may even have some impact on the port and stuff like that. So pretty interesting. Major Hurricane says, a shame this stuff has to happen right around finals time for UW. So it's so interesting to track. It really is, and I'm hoping I'll be able to maybe see some of it, track a little bit of it with my finals being a little bit earlier in finals week versus later. So, but shout out to anyone also preparing for finals out there. So that's the Puyallup River. Mark also asked about the White River. We'll take a look at that because the White River does flow into the Puyallup River. The White River will get to its highest levels in a few years. You can see it's basically as close to flood stage as you can get without getting into flood stage. Flood stage is 7,500 cubic feet per second. It gets to like 7,478, so like super, super close. So both the White River and the Puyallup River are going to be basically flooding, and yeah, that's exactly what Mark is saying there. It'll wash all the debris that is built up over all these years along the riverbanks. Yes, so that is the big concern when you get basically near record flooding, is that you have this debris has built up along the rivers for, in some cases, decades. And that's the problem when you get these like huge flooding events like for the Puyallup River. When you get it reaching its highest level in like 30 years, you have 30 years worth of stuff that people thought doesn't move getting washed down the river. And that obviously is not a good situation. So obviously, as Mark was saying in our chat here, huge heads up for boaters that, you could be, if you're boating, say, next weekend, there could be a ton of logs in the sound because when you think about it, and when we look at it here, you have all the rivers that flood that are going to wash into the Sound are going to be, you got the Nisqually, the Puyallup, the Green, which turns into the Duwamish, then the whole Snoqualmie River system, which, as we were just saying, lets out a massive amount of debris. That comes out in Everett, the Snoqualmie, Snohomish, Skykomish River system there comes out in Everett. We have the issues with getting logs off the trestles and the bridges and stuff in there. The Stillaguamish River, the Skagit River, which is a debris machine. Side note here, anytime you go over the Skagit River on I-5 there, if you look off to your right, if you're going north, you see just logs everywhere. So there's a ton of debris that comes out the Skagit River, and then even the Nooksack River getting into action stage, which could cause some debris to come down. Of course, we kind of cleared that out back in 2021. What about the White River through Auburn? That's what we're looking at right here, Emerald. This is the White River at R Street is what we're looking at here. So R Street, that's South Auburn. And this is likely to get above action stage, so bank full there Wednesday night. And then you remain at flood stage all the way into the weekend, and it still remains high. So that's pretty interesting to see. Mark says the Foss Waterway will be a mess with debris flowing into the marinas with the tides and currents. Yeah, it will be. The tides are still, we're kind of out of king tides for the Puget Sound over the next couple days, but the tides are still a little bit higher. And then we do have another round of those king tides, which dislodge a lot of driftwood anyway as we go into early January. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting go of it for some folks who have boats or the marinas and stuff like that. So, heads up for that, folks. Let's reload the European model, see how far we've gotten here with our, we'll go back to the precipitable water so we can look at where the atmospheric river is going. See if we're getting the new data in. Yeah, we are getting the new data in now. So you see that atmospheric river starting to get closer here, European model showing it. We're getting through Monday morning. You see that just huge slog of moisture slamming into the area there. We can actually zoom in a little bit. Let's go to the Pacific Northwest here. There we go. So these numbers, don't be really too scared by these numbers. This is percent of normal precipitable water. So again, precipitable water is the very long term for the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. So 100% of normal is kind of your baseline. And then you can look at, as this atmospheric river hits, I mean, you just get some massive amounts of rain. Look at the amounts of moisture you're looking at as we go through the day tomorrow. 300% of normal moisture. And it's kind of funny to think about because the Pacific Northwest is, as it is, a very wet area, a very wet place. I mean, we got moss everywhere, you got trees everywhere on the west side of the Cascades. So just thinking about the fact that we're going to have 300% of normal moisture across the area, and this is just Monday, and the atmospheric river goes south and then comes back north. Let me check the chat here. Rod says, evening, Matt, what's interesting with the flooding predictions? The Olympic Peninsula's north and west ends seem to be predicted for normal December rainfalls, or am I reading that wrong? Let's look here. I wasn't actually paying attention too much to that. So we've seen, I think in 2021, it was just some crazy flooding down the Dungeness and Elwha rivers, and of course the Kalawa and Bogachil rivers over on the west side of the Olympic Peninsula. It looks like with this atmospheric river, the Elwha River is going to get up into action stage there, but very briefly. And really this just kind of has to do with how the rainfall gets distributed. There's a lot more rain falling in the Cascades than the Olympics with this storm. And also, the Olympics can take a lot more rain without having huge flooding problems. You can see you do get a rise on some of these rivers. So this is the Kalawa River and Forks there. It rises a few feet, probably like 4 to 6 feet there, but it doesn't get up into flood stage. And then the same thing with the Bogachil River down by La Push. It rises quite a bit. I mean, you're at 28 feet right now, it gets up to 32, so it's 4 feet in a couple days. But it doesn't really flood. Even the Dungeness River, kind of rain-shadowed here, it rises, but it doesn't flood. You got some huge flooding on these rivers back a few years ago. It doesn't look like we're going to get that now, which is good to see. Kenny Lee says, when will we get some cold weather? The jet stream is allowing warm air in the northwest. It's supposed to be 60 in Boise. That 60 degrees in Boise there is going to be because of the atmospheric river, actually. That's kind of how that works. So I have the temperatures open somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if we zoom out, I'll include Boise in there. Okay, so Boise is down in the corner here. So look at our previous map. So Monday's temperatures, you'll notice it's going to be warm out there. Highs across western Washington Monday in the mid 50s. You can see eastern Washington. Look at the Tri-Cities, 60 in Kennewick, 55 all the way down to the Willamette Valley, 57 down in Eugene, 55 along the Oregon coast. So the atmospheric river, it pumps a lot of southerly flow up into the area, and that's what just warms it up. I mean, look at the Oregon Cascades. It's like there's no freezing temperatures anywhere. Even the Washington Cascades, it's really warm. We go into Tuesday, and you see it cools down a little bit across parts of western Washington because the atmospheric river pushes south briefly. But you still have highs in the upper 40s to low 50s, and the mountains are still above freezing. Even there, eastern Washington, again, you get that southerly flow with the atmospheric river. It's like 60 in the Tri-Cities. And then 55, 57 there in the Willamette Valley. As we go into Wednesday, we warm way back up across parts of the Puget Sound area. Again, there's your 60 in Boise you were talking about there, Kenny. You can see, again, mid-50s again on Wednesday in Puget Sound, and then down the Willamette Valley in the upper 50s, maybe even near 60 in Portland. And this is actually how we usually set high temperature records in December, is you get these big systems come into the area, and you get the southerly flow, and that warms us up. You can see Thursday, again, 55 in Seattle, 60 in Portland, 65 in the Tri-Cities. I mean, just some crazy temperatures for December. And then even into Friday, you can see those highs remain warm. 56 in Seattle, 55 in Portland, 58 over in the Tri-Cities, and then, maybe a little bit of cooling down in Boise there, but still, atmospheric river brings a lot of southerly flow, warms up those temperatures way more than you can get any other time or any other way in December there. Okay, yeah, major hurricane there in the chat. Probably not any nice cold weather in the next 2 weeks. This pattern looks to just keep continuing. Let's look at that on a broader scale. I think we have a view of this that I like here. Yeah, you can kind of see it here. So, here actually the Gulf of Alaska view is a little bit better. So this is kind of the pattern that we're looking at over the next couple weeks. We can go back to the extended European model forecast and run this all the way out through this week and then into next week. And you see when this kind of a pattern sets up here, you have this troughing, which is just consistent low pressure over the Gulf of Alaska. You have ridging off here over California. That allows all these warm systems to just keep slamming into the northwest because your cold air is kind of bottled up here in British Columbia, maybe leaking out over the Gulf of Alaska. And then you have just these systems on the jet stream moving into the Pacific Northwest. And while we may cool down a little bit, maybe get some mountain snow out of this, it's not going to be any like big, cold, lowland snow, anything like that. And it does actually open us up to more atmospheric rivers because the pattern is there. So that's something we have to watch, that as absurd as it may seem that I'm already talking about more atmospheric rivers, it's not out of the question at this point. Rod says in the chat, really do appreciate that focus, live in Forks. Yeah, awesome. I'm always very intrigued whenever I go to Forks, like how people deal with 120 inches of rain every year. But yeah, glad to help you out, Rod, anytime. Mark says, how's landslide risk looking this week? Always worried about Schuster Parkway leading to Ruston Way along the Tacoma waterfront. It's prone to landslides. That's one of many areas that is prone to landslides in western Washington. I think it's one of our kind of forgotten hazards that people don't really think about the landslide risk until a landslide is happening. We were talking earlier about the BNSF Railway and how it could be impacted by landslides, especially north of Seattle. We talk about that somewhat frequently each year. The N line for the Sounder, the Amtrak Cascade service from Seattle to Vancouver and the points in between there, and then of course the freight service between Seattle and points north and east all goes up through there. This graphic here from the USGS is kind of an annoying graphic because it's a little bit weird. But what you're looking at here on your y-axis here on the left, you've got your 3-day cumulative precipitation in inches. So this 1 is 1 inch of precipitation in 3 days. 3 is 3 inches in 3 days. And then down here on your x-axis, you have precipitation over the last 15 days before the 3-day precipitation we're looking at over here. So basically, you're combining the rain that is forecasted and the rain that has fallen over the last 2 weeks, or the rain that's fallen in the last 3 days versus the rain that has fallen in the last 2 weeks. And the higher these values get, once you get near and past this red line, is when you have landslide problems. The interesting thing is that you're already getting closer to that line, and these are just 24 hours. So you have here the square is Everett Payne Field, the circle is Tacoma Narrows Airport, the hexagon is Seattle Tacoma Airport, or SeaTac there, and then the triangle is Boeing Field. The faded version of each of these shapes is the forecast in 24 hours from now, and you can see how already you get Tacoma and Seattle getting much kind of skyrocketing up on this graphic. So the landslide risk is very high. It will get very high as we go through the next few days. I don't really know what any of these other graphics are, but this is the one that we usually use, that if you get if you get near or above this red line, you're going to have problems, and there will be landslides. So, for example, I live in Federal Way. Some people in the area may know that we've had some problems before with landslides occurring on Highway 18 going down into Auburn. And that's something we always watch for. Of course, you watch for it on the bluffs along Puget Sound. You got some really significant bluffs around here, and those are some places where you can get some really big problems with landslides as well. Let me double check what's going on in the chat here. Puget Sound Stormwatch says Randy with Whatcom County weather is live now too. Yeah, if anyone in here is in Whatcom County and you really want some good information with Whatcom County specific stuff, go check out Randy Small, Whatcom County weather. He's live right now. He's going to be able to talk about Whatcom County a whole lot better than I can, because he lives there and he's lived there his whole life. It's he's got some incredible knowledge up about that area. Major Hurricane says the 12Z Euro, so this afternoon's Euro model, was absurd with the extended precip, had 10.8 inches for Portland through the next 2 weeks. The Cascades maxing out the color scale. Yeah, that's just kind of underscoring that while that may not happen, take the 10 to 12 inches of rain for Seattle and Portland in 2 weeks with a grain of salt. That's showing that the pattern is there for a lot of rain. And again, it was like what we were talking about here, it's right here, the troughing over the Gulf of Alaska and the ridging over California and the west and the southwest opens that storm track, opens that atmospheric river potential for the Northwest going into the week after next, and maybe even later than that. The new 0Z Euro has 3 inches for Portland through 10 a.m. Tuesday, which is just insane. Let's take a look at that. That's got to be running a little bit more now. Okay, let's reload. Let's see how much more data we got. We've got a pretty good amount here. So here we go. This is the precipitable water. Let's zoom out a little bit. Atmospheric river, there it is. He's kind of hard to miss. Slams into the northwest on Monday. You see it all the way through Monday night, and then as we go into Tuesday, it pushes south, but not as much as it was earlier. And then you can see it starts to push back north as we go to Tuesday night into Wednesday. And then look at some of these values. That's just a ton of precipitable water. And then that just continues all the way through midday Wednesday. We have this through Thursday morning, and you can see it's still draped across areas from like Eugene to Everett. So now let's see what we can do with precipitation totals here. We'll play this out. As Michael Snyder would say, this model is hot off the presses, and we're just now all getting to see it for the first time together. So as we go through Monday, you can see we get decent totals through Monday night. We can stop this on the European model here. 2 inches of rain in Tacoma tomorrow, 2.5 in Olympia, 2.65 in Centralia, 1.5 in Portland, and then you see the rain shadowing from Seattle northward, 1.5 in Seattle, an inch in Everett, an inch in Bellingham. The coast getting 1.5 to 3 inches of rain. Then as we go into Tuesday, that rain continues mainly south of Olympia, but then that atmospheric river pushes back north into western Washington as we go through Wednesday and into Thursday there. And then you can see as we go into this runs all the way out through Thursday morning. There is more rain to come with this because it will continue going through Thursday and into possibly all the way into early Friday. But so here we go through Thursday at 8 a.m. You can see looking at Seattle northward, 2.5 inches of rain looks to be your blanket amount. There may be 2 to 2.5 inches, a little bit more in some places. Seattle itself getting about 3.5 inches of rain. Seattle southward there toward Federal Way, Tacoma, Olympia, getting 3.5 to 4.5 inches, 5 inches in Olympia, 5.5 inches in Shelton, and on the coast there, 3.5 inches for Forks, it looks like. And then you can see from Olympia down toward Portland, 3.5 to 5 inches of rain. So that's just some crazy amounts there showing up. And that's just through Thursday morning. There's still more rain with this through the day Thursday. And then, of course, your flood drivers here are the rain totals in the Cascades. A foot of rain there, Central Cascades, including the Snoqualmie River headwaters. And then look at Central and Southern Cascades up toward 13 inches. Even the Olympics and the Willapa Hills picking up a little bit more in this run than they had previously. You're looking up toward a foot of rain there for the Olympics and the Willapa Hills. And exactly what Major Hurricane there is saying in the chat, that the precipitation is very concerning for I-5 around Centralia. See what happens with the flood gauge impacts update with the latest model runs. Yeah, for sure. Gloria P in the chat there, thank you very much for your generosity. Thank you guys very much, everyone who supported with the super chats today, donating money. Very kind of you guys. Mark says, thanks for sharing the graph about the landslides. Highway 18, Peasley Canyon, and Jovita by Edgewood and Milton are also prone to landslides, as well as West Valley Highway in the Auburn and Sumner Valley. I've been on every single one of those roads hundreds of times in my life, and yes, absolutely. We have, and anyone could say that for all the other valleys around the Northwest. There are so many river valleys around here. I think sometimes we kind of forget how many river valleys and how many little creek valleys even there are around here that can get landslides and can get a lot of landslides. So that is something to watch. Let's see if we can get a little bit more precipitation data here. Yeah, here we go all the way out through Friday afternoon. You can see about 3 to 4 inches from Seattle southward. So pretty big amounts there. In the Cascades and in the lowlands. 4 inches for Portland looks to be a total 3.5 for Seattle. 4 to 4.5 around Tacoma. 5.6 inches there in Shelton. 5 inches in Olympia. And then down through from Olympia down toward Portland. So overall, just a really significant storm here. You're looking at, again, 10 to 12 inches in the Cascades, and that's what causes that flooding, because that's 10 to 12 inches from Monday to Friday. I mean, that's crazy. Joe asked in the chat there, how about Yakima? For rain, Yakima is not going to see too much because it shows 3 inches for Yakima here on the European model forecast, but it is not good at resolving where the edge of this terrain is. So Yakima will likely, in reality, receive much less than that. If we look at the national blend of models, you can see Yakima receiving about 1 inch of rain because it knows how to cut off this the Cascades a little bit more there. So Yakima receiving about 1 inch of rain, but something we have pointed out here, the Yakima River from basically its headwaters up on I-90 near Snoqualmie Pass all the way down to the Columbia River where it meets there in Richland is going to be in flood stage. So here is the Yakima River at Parker, Washington is the closest we get to the Yakima River in Yakima itself. And you can see we get to bank full stage on the Yakima River near Yakima early Wednesday morning. It looks like it's going to crest there Thursday afternoon to evening, and then starts to drop back down toward bank full as we go into Friday night. So again, that's a pretty significant flood for the Yakima River. It doesn't often flood from atmospheric rivers on the west side, so that's pretty interesting to see. Thank you, Brian, for tuning in as always. We'll see if we can let's get some more data in from the European model for the wind, because the European is running right now. Yeah, Joe, it is getting up there. That's some pretty significant flooding for the Yakima River. European model looks like it got a little bit weaker there for some of the winds across the metro area there. 40 miles an hour in Renton, 42 in Seattle, 42 in Tacoma, 38 in Olympia, 43 in Shelton, 45 for Bremerton, 44 in Everett, and then 46 up in Bellingham. So again, 40 to 45 miles per hour, almost exactly what the Weather Service is forecasting in that wind advisory. You can see 45 miles an hour or so on the coast as well. Oftentimes, some of our higher resolution models totally overdo that amount of wind on the south side of an atmospheric river. So that's why I said to take with a grain of salt what we were seeing with the NAM and the HER model showing almost 50 miles per hour across the Puget Sound areas. So again, if you guys in the chat have any questions about specific areas in terms of rainfall totals, river flooding, all that, we still got more time here. I'd love to keep answering some questions while I got y'all on here, especially about specific rivers and what the impacts could be. We can go into each river forecast and it will tell you what areas are going to flood when it gets to a certain level. So be sure to throw that in the chat there, and I'll be sure to answer as many as I can. All right, let me see what's going on here in the chat. The east wind towards Portland looks interesting. Is it an east wind, or is it just a... Let's see. So southerly there. Looks like it does... It doesn't actually really go easterly. Looks like it's just a southerly that kind of hits the mountains there. Yeah. Christopher says Cannon Beach, Oregon. Yeah, let's take a look at Cannon Beach. So Cannon Beach right in here, I mean, you're going to get like 7 to 8 inches of rain in a week in Cannon Beach. That's pretty crazy. So yeah, it's going to be wet in Cannon Beach. Wetter than usual. Which, it's always wet on the coast, but wetter than normal. That's the National Blended models. Let's see about the European model here. I'm not sure which. You've got a lot of tabs open here, so we got to find which one it is. Let's just use this one. All right, European model. Let's see how far out we can go, all the way to Friday night. Yeah, again, so there's your consensus for Cannon Beach there, Christopher. Yeah, 6 to 8 inches of rain in a week. That's just some pretty crazy amounts. And an interesting way to kind of put all this in context, folks, is to look at our average data. So we can use this. This is from the National Weather Service in Seattle, but they have Hoquiam, Washington on here, so that's kind of significant for the coast. And you can see that your December average is 10.5 inches. And you're going to get like most of that in, you're going to get like half of that this week. So Seattle is actually a little bit more significant. So here is SeaTac Airport. Your December average there, 5.7 inches of rain. SeaTac is going to get like 4 inches of rain this week. So you're going to get most of that. Gonna get most of that this week. We can look at Portland as well. Let's take a look here. Portland has a good site for that too. Let's pull it up here. All right, so we were just talking about Cannon Beach. So Astoria is as close as we can get. So Astoria Airport, your average for the month of December is 10.6 inches of rain. You're gonna get like 7 inches this week. So you're gonna get that. Yeah, major hurricane. Thank you. We were thinking the same thing there because that's what I'm looking at right here. So 10.68 inches is your average for Astoria, and you're gonna get like 6 to 8 of that this week. So that's over half your average rainfall in a week. Yeah, holy smokes is right, Christopher. Joey asks the Wenatchee River there. Let's take a look at the Wenatchee River. I'm not sure what our flooding forecast is looking at here. So, all right, so here's the Wenatchee River in Montesano. It's going to rise, but it's not going to rise too much. So you can see you're looking at about a 4 to 5 foot rise there. On the Wenatchee River, and that's again because the Olympic Mountains, especially the southern slopes, can handle a kind of ridiculous amount of rain before it gets to big flooding versus the Cascades where that doesn't happen as often and you don't get these huge dumps of rain. Often it's a lot of snow. So the Wenatchee River not going to flood. It looks like it'll rise, and you'll notice it rise. It's a 6-foot river rise. It's nothing to sneeze at, but it's not going to get into flood stage. Mark saying in the chat here, it's crazy how dry we were for months this summer and how we can get this much rain in a week. Hope this helps any drought situation. That's a good thing to look at. But it is also worth noting that we got 0 inches of rain in August or July. It was. I got 0 inches of rain at my weather station this July, and this week I'm going to get 5 inches almost. here is the drought monitor. I know there's some out there who don't really like this site. I personally think it is kind of helpful. So what we can see here is the drought monitor for Washington, and it doesn't look great. We've knocked down some of this D2 severe drought here, which you can see across kind of from Lewis County up through Snohomish and Island and Jefferson counties. It was basically covering all of western Washington by the end of the summer. But you can see we've knocked it down quite a bit. We're removing the drought there on the coast, and eastern Washington doing quite a bit better as well. This data was released actually just this past Thursday. And this is going to go down some more as we go through these next couple weeks. The problem is we've still been below average over the last month. November started out really wet. We got like 4 inches of rain in 2 weeks, and then it really calmed down, and we ended up not getting very much rain through the end of November. So we'll see if we kind of have the same thing happen in December, or if we end up having just a sodden month. So looking more broadly here, and we can use this to kind of see how both our extended pattern is looking at and the outlook for the drought here. So this is the monthly drought outlook through December. So you can see these green areas here are drought removal. So that means your drought monitor things are going to go away. So it's going to degrade completely, and it's going to be gone. And then this other color here that's like, I guess you could say a very, very light tan, means drought remains but gets better. So your drought is going to improve across some of the Puget Sound area, but it's not going to be gone. So at least it's going to improve there. You can see it a little bit better there if I zoom in. It's going to improve. It's not going to get much better, but it will noticeably decrease, which is a good thing. Taking a look at the categories here for our temperature outlook and our precipitation outlook. This is basically the middle to the end of December. So December 15th to 21st is what we're looking at here. So the 15th is just over a week from now. That is my calendar next to me here says it's Hanukkah. So Hanukkah, Monday the 15th through Sunday the 21st. That is the first day of winter, or astronomical winter, not meteorological winter. You can see our temperatures are above average, not good for snowpack, and look at our precipitation. That's a pretty strong signal for above average for the Pacific Northwest there. As Major Hurricane says in the chat there, it won't be building much snowpack at all because it's so warm. In fact, we're melting a lot of the snow this weekend. Yeah, it's going away. It's a sad year so far for the ski areas because they're basically just watching all their snow like come and go. You snow a little bit and then it gets melted away. And in the case of this week, the snow is being melted away in a very big way. Major Hurricane asked, do you know what times the river gauge site updates? I don't actually know that. I just always happen to look at it and something new is on there. We got an update at, I believe, like the mid-afternoon here. You can see it if you click on one of these graphics, then you look at the bottom and see when the forecast was issued. This forecast was issued at 6:20 p.m. So I doubt that we're going to get an update until very early tomorrow morning. Then we'll kind of see how things play out from there. Mark says, thanks for sharing the drought maps. Always dreading wildfires and smoke for the next year. Yeah, I think everyone dreads that smoke season now. Of course, we call it smoke season because it basically is happening like a season now. You know, it's not something that happens every few years. Smoke happens every year, which is unfortunate, but that is just kind of the reality that we're living in. But yeah, be sure to throw in the chat there, you guys, if you want forecast for any specific river, even some of the smaller creeks like Issaquah Creek and South Prairie Creek. We have forecasts for those as well. That's actually one that I might as well just look at right now. So I do know a little bit about this here. I go down here somewhat frequently. South Prairie Creek. For those that don't know, South Prairie is between Orting and Bonnie Lake in Pierce County. And South Prairie Creek is one of the bigger tributaries of the Carbon River, which itself is a tributary of the Puyallup River. And what you're looking at here is a kind of that 1-2 with the river flooding. So that you can see Monday night we start to get the South Prairie Creek into moderate flood stage by early Tuesday morning, drops back down Tuesday night, then rises through Wednesday and stays at moderate flood stage through Wednesday evening into Thursday morning before finally dropping off by the time we get to Thursday night there. What does this mean? So at 5,500 feet, South Prairie Creek will cause, or 5,500 cubic feet per second. Our max is 6,600 cubic feet per second. So at 5,500 cubic feet per second, the South Prairie Creek will cause flooding from above the town of South Prairie downstream through the Carbon River. Floodwaters inundate roads, residential areas, and farms, including South Prairie Carbon River Road, South Prairie Road, Spring Site Road, and most importantly here, Highway 162. So expect some travel difficulties on Highway 162 with South Prairie Creek likely flooding there on Wednesday. Let me check in the chat here. Oh yeah, major hurricane. We might have looked at that site together. I think I remember that. John says Mount St. Helens probably going to lose a lot of snow from this warm. From this warm rain. Yeah, it probably will. Mount St. Helens height now post eruption 8,300 feet, I believe, and the snow level is going to be at like 7,000 feet. So yeah, it could be a kind of dismal forecast for Mount St. Helens. Unfortunately, because we really do need the snow, and we're just not getting it at all. James, thank you for joining the chat. Peace to everyone. Stay safe. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody got to make sure they're staying safe in this storm. Let's get some updated atmospheric river information. You can see we go all the way out into the extended forecast now on the European model. So let's do that. Let's kind of see what kind of things it may be throwing at us here over the next couple weeks. So let's start here. This is the atmospheric river. You can see it slam into the northwest on Monday and then pushes south a little bit more out of western Washington into Oregon on Tuesday, then pushes back north into western Washington again Tuesday night through Wednesday, stays aimed at the area all the way through Wednesday and then into Thursday. You can see it pushes south a little bit Thursday, but then moves back north kind of sloppy on early Friday. Then you can see more of that atmospheric river activity potentially Saturday, a little bit further north there, before it kind of slides through western Washington Saturday night. Then we maybe dry out a little bit going into Sunday, and then we have even more storm activity here as we go into Monday. And then into next week, you get even more atmospheric river potential way out into the extended forecast there. So again, that pattern we were looking at earlier with the ridge over California, the troughing over the Gulf of Alaska, allows that storm track to be open for the atmospheric river type systems to come all the way up from Hawaii through into western Washington, and it is really not helpful for our snowpack at all. So that's kind of the bottom line there. So yeah, we've been going for about 2 hours now. We'll look real quick again, just an overview of what's going on here. I posted about it on my Twitter account earlier today, so we'll just take a look at that thread real quick, and then I think we will wrap it up. So this is the thread I posted, major atmospheric river thread here. So we were looking at the Euro and the NBM models. The lowlands from Seattle northward get 1.5 to 3.5 inches of rain through Friday. The lowlands from Seattle southward get 3.5 to 6 inches through Friday. Then those higher amounts towards 6 inches, of course, a little bit more isolated. Cascades and the Olympics get 8 to 16 inches through Friday. That right here, this line, that's the driver of the river flooding. Bottom line there, that is what causes the flooding, is those amounts in the Cascades. The coast gets 4 to 6 inches through Monday. Or through Friday, sorry. So a little bit less than maybe you'd expect on the coast. But yeah, so then going through this thread here, impactful river flooding. So your major river flooding likely on the Snoqualmie, Skagit, Skykomish, Puyallup River at Ording, and the Cowlitz and Nisqually rivers. Moderate river flooding at the Snohomish, Tolts, Skokomish, Newaukum, Chehalis, and South Prairie Creek. And the Carbon River as well. I forgot to put that on there because it had been upgraded. And then minor river flooding. I forgot to type minor right there. It says minor flooding is Stillaguamish, Yakima, Chehalis, and Puyallup rivers as well. So there's a lot of flooding for sure. And then the wind forecast again, you can see lowlands maybe 40 to 50 miles per hour, coast 40 to 55 miles per hour, the strait maybe getting 45 to 50 miles per hour, not a big westerly surge or anything, but a decent one. And then eastern Washington 45 to 60 miles per hour. So especially Spokane and Pullman, Palouse, those areas, really watch out because there could be some pretty serious wind gusts out there. So yeah, we'll wrap it up with this right here because, again, this is our biggest impact is the river flooding. We'll wrap it up on the river flooding page there. You can see the purples is your major flooding. The reds is your moderate. Oranges is minor. Yellow, there's a lot of yellow. That means we're at bank full. So it's obviously quite a bit going on across the region. So how can you stay updated here? So, of course, be sure to like, share, subscribe here on Western Washington Weather. Subscribing to the channel is the best way to help this channel grow. Helps me produce a better quality product here if you guys subscribe and help the algorithm kind of grow this channel here. You can also follow on the Western Washington Weather Facebook group. That's a great place to stay updated and get some more long-form updates and kind of engage in a little bit more community with folks there on the Western Washington Weather Facebook group. And you can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm on both of those. The links to all of these, the Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky, are all in the description of this video, so you can go check that out as soon as I end the stream. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Thanks for tuning in here, especially everyone who stayed on for 2 hours. Thank you guys. It was great to chat with you all and to get a lot of updates here on the rivers. I will have another video out tomorrow morning, as always, and then updates throughout the day on social media. And who knows, if we're looking active again, I may do a short video again tomorrow night. So we'll see about that, so stay tuned for more. Over the next few days, stay safe out there, yeah, please stay safe, especially on the roads. There's going to be a lot of standing water and stuff like that. And then, of course, if you live in a river valley, be careful, be prepared for flooding in any way that you need to be. Obviously, the residents know those areas better than I do standing here. But thank you all very much for watching. Stay tuned, stay safe, and I will talk to you all later. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you, guys.